Hey, welcome. My name is Lee Freeman, and you're enjoying us with the Small Business Freestyle podcast, where we learn and talk to business owners that are out there making it work just like you are, trying to improve, trying to get better, and trying to live life, balance their business and their lives, and looking for ways to improve. And thanks for joining us today. We've got a really cool guest today. I've had the fortunate opportunity to work with him for a while, and Jim Nehez, he's a geotechnical engineer, and maybe got the wrong term. You can correct me, Jim. Here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, has had some really neat adventures in his career, and the adventure he's been on the last few years is as a solo entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur and developing his private practice. So, Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Lee.
So just to kind of give us a little basis for where we're at, you went to college at the Citadel here, right?
Went in the Citadel.
Back when it was really the Citadel, huh?
Yeah. I graduated in '77, and at the time we were in the middle of a recession, and frankly there just weren't any jobs, and I had thought at one time about packing up and just driving to Alaska because they were working on the Alaska pipeline, and that was one of the big civil engineering projects at the time. And I was bartending in Charleston, and one of the members of the club owned a geotechnical engineering and materials testing firm, and he was in there one day, and he said, "Well, have you had any offers?" And I said, "Well, no, I've had some interviews, but pretty much everybody says, well, you don't have much experience." And I said, "Well, I graduated a week ago, and so you're right about that." Yeah. And so, but he said, "Well, come in Monday, and we'll talk." And he offered me a job, and I was pretty desperate. So I really didn't have any background in what was what the different disciplines of civil engineering were. But I realized early that I fell into something that was perfect for me, because geotechnical engineering is the study of soils. And so what our responsibility is to determine the type and strength of the soils that are going to be beneath a proposed building, and make recommendations for the foundation support for that building. And then we get the opportunity to test the materials, concrete and soils, during construction. And at some point, this kind of morphed into environmental as well, primarily because we had drill rigs. But the beauty of this for me was it was a good combination of in the office research, out of the office. It wasn't the same. I've been doing this for 46 years, and I don't think I've done the same thing 2 days in a row. And that's so it's been a constant challenge. And of course, in the coastal plain and starting in Charleston, the soils we have are not ideal. And so each project becomes a challenge.
So you always have good news to deliver about soils to people,
I never
right?
have good news. I've often said that in my next life, I want to have a job where I can be the bearer of good news occasionally. It's one of those things where it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind type thing, where when people hire us to do this work, they largely don't believe they need us anyway.
Right.
And so if there are no potential foundation problems, then they say, well, we just wasted this money. And then if there are foundation problems, then I've killed the project.
Yeah.
So there's no happy.
So you don't get hugs either way, do you?
No, it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. Now, what I have had some success with is new technologies where I can come in, and when we've got a particularly bad site, I can do some additional testing
Yeah.
to show that we can actually use shallow foundations instead of piles, and that results in sometimes $100,000, $200,000 savings to the project.
Yes.
So.
Well, the bottom line is what you do ends up ultimately making sure lives are safe and secure, so this is a good chance to talk about. So I want to make sure we do it here in the Myrtle Beach area. I mean, years past and even currently, you've been involved in some cool projects. What are some ones that maybe folks around here would know right off?
Well, one of the most recent ones we finished is the 26-story Marriott dual-branded tower at the end of 21st Avenue. Yeah. And the beauty of that project was it was right around the corner from our office, and so we had easy access. But we took a tour about a year ago once it was finished, and we were at the top, and one of the contractors, a local big-time contractor, and asked me some questions about the project, and I said, well, the truth is that if I do my job right, nothing happens. So and he liked that a lot and has used it ever since.
Ever since,
but when you're standing at the top of a 26-story building and you did the foundation and you did the piles and
it's
you tested the concrete,
then
it's a good feeling.
Yes,
There's creating something out of nothing is probably the best career you can have.
Now, I imagine you get some interesting projects with folks that are building these, let's just say, mansions by the sea, of what they want to do sometimes and what they can't do. How has that worked?
Well, we've got some. Again, I've been doing this a long time, and there's always the time when this owner says, okay, well, I don't care about FEMA and I don't care about these rules and these laws. Will the sand hold the house today? And I've always said, well, here's the thing. FEMA says that within this flood hazard velocity zone that the house needs to be supported on a deep foundation. And that's because during a hurricane, potentially 7 or 8 feet of the top material can disappear. And so if that's what's supporting your house is going with it. And so if you don't use a deep foundation and the hurricane does come, and FEMA comes in and they said, well, here's the thing. You didn't build this thing in accordance with our requirements, so the insurance company is now going to pay you nada. At that point, you're not going to be mad enough to sue me. You're going to be mad enough to kill me. So, no, if I'm involved and it's on Front Beach, it's going to be on a pile foundation. And people have gone other directions and said, no, I'm not doing that. And a lot of what we do now is based on things like potential earthquakes, and we are in an active earthquake zone. We don't realize it so much. The biggest earthquake we've experienced is Charleston, 1886, but there were probably 30 or 40 earthquakes in Charleston last year. The fault runs through Somerville, and it's a highly active earthquake zone. We can't predict the magnitude of these earthquakes, but we're required to design for these things.
What I pick up, Jim, from this, and even when we talk, you are a professional and you are highly passionate still after all these years about what you do, and I know you've had a large part of your career was in corporate or larger firms and ran locations and departments, and then had a transition to Panama, which I want to talk about for a minute, and then to being a private business owner. But can you talk about kind of the difference between being involved in the corporate world, so to speak, versus your own business?
My opinion is that large corporations are more about, and not just engineering, but across the board, are not really about, they may be selling it, but not about innovation, but about risk management and risk mitigation. What they don't want is for something not to work or to cause them problems. Right. And unfortunately, to me, in engineering, what happens is you've got a large corporation that says, if this, then this. And you don't have a choice as to, okay, but over here we've got a better solution.
You can provide some solutions and options
that we can use.
Yeah.
No, that's not our policy. And and that bugged me as an engineer. Yeah. And so to me, that's the advantage of being a small engineering firm, is you have that ability to make those decisions. Yes. Yes. And you do it within a format of safety for the client and safety for people, but you're not restricted from new solutions.
You know, it's interesting you said that. I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman that had recently sold his company, and I asked him, I said, what do you think your strongest suit was? And he says, he thought about it for a minute, and he said, I was resourceful. He said, I was determined to find ways to make things work or solution. And what you're talking about there is, as a business owner, you can be use your skill, but also use your resourcefulness, your problem-solving ability, and bringing that a little more freely to a project. And I think that's what I find in common with a lot of entrepreneurs, is they're natural problem solvers, or they're natural at thinking, not giving up on making sure they've looked at every way they can solve a problem. And that's kind of what you're talking about now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is the very heart of engineering.
Yes.
Is that's one of those things that that's what we do every day, is solve problems.
Right.
And sometimes that can be a good or a bad thing. It's excellent as an engineer. It might be bad as a husband. Because a lot of times I heard, no, I don't need you to solve the problem. And then I was asking, okay, but why did you give me all the details? I just wanted
so
you
that's
to
a
know.
pro tip for husbands. It's like sometimes we're
it.
supposed to just listen, right?
Just listen.
Oh, golly. Let me make a note of that.
I do have to turn that switch from time to time.
I don't need you to solve the problem. I just need you to, I think that, I think that's great advice.
But it's my natural affinity to solve the problem.
Yes.
And because invariably there is a solution.
Yes.
You're just not doing it.
So in talking about that, you're a passionate engineer, you're an accomplished engineer, you're in this specialization. Does that automatically transfer to being and making it easy, or knowing how exactly to run your own business? It's kind of a setup question.
Yeah,
okay,
that was a loaded question. No, there. Actually, I ended up, and we can back up and talk about this, but I ended up being out of the country for 5 or 6 years, and when I came back, I was over 60. People weren't beating my door down to hire me, and I had the opportunity to start this company. I don't think in my right mind I would have ever wanted to run my own business, but you see the advantages of it at some time. But there should be some sort of learning course prior to taking that leap, where they teach you all the pitfalls that you're going to run across in advance. Because for years I kept learning stuff, and I'm going, I didn't know that, and and you felt like you were being piled on, and to me it was a very lonely position to be in. Sometimes a position of leadership is lonely anyway,
Right.
And when you are ultimately the leader and manager of an organization and of people, now to some extent you have to distance yourself from those people. You're going to be required to make decisions that aren't friendly decisions. They're based on the state of the business at the time, but you have to be willing to make those decisions.
That's
and
good point.
that's very difficult, and it's very lonely.
But I think that's really, I think it's a message out there that folks need to hear, or is you're at this point, you've got all this experience, you love what you do, this option that you may not have chose, you step into starting your own business, and certainly a leap of faith, but it was an area to practice what you enjoy doing, and certainly like a lot of owners, you just take a lot of lumps those first few years, finding out, what you don't know often. But let's, to make sure we get it in, because I want to jump back to this point, but let's back up. When you were out of the country for 5 years, it was a pretty awesome reason that you were out of the country. So
it was.
Tell us about that.
In 2011, I had a phone call from an ex-employee of mine, and he said to me, Jim, I've got the Panama Canal project, and I need you down here to be project engineer, and it was funny because he acted like this was a project that everybody knew about. I think the first Time magazine article about this project, it said the largest project in the world that nobody's ever heard of. It didn't have a whole lot of publicity outside of Panama, and this was Panama Canal Expansion.
The expansion
project. It was a $5.4 billion project.
Wow! And this was in
2011 is when we started. Now they had been going for a couple of years prior to that with preliminary stuff and things like that. And this project was voted on by the country to expand the canal, to have the ability to accommodate the super tankers.
The super tankers, okay.
And currently they could not. So these things had to go all the way around, the Cape of Good Hope, or all the way through the Suez Canal, and one of the things that I learned during this process was that without the Panama Canal, it would take about an additional 30 days to go around South America. They crossed Panama in 8 hours, and I think it's like $300,000 a day to operate these freighters.
Wow.
It's you see them out there, you don't even have any clue. And these guys would book passage on the Panama Canal a year in advance, and then arrive weeks in advance of their passage. And so the bay is just full of ships that are waiting to go through. And so, for me, the decision was a no-brainer. I'd been a civil engineer for my whole life, and civil engineer, Panama Canal, that's. And in many ways, this project was as historically significant as the original Panama Canal.
Yes, because the world has converted to the super tankers. I mean, look recently, again, South Carolina's at a competitive advantage with our local Charleston harbor because now it's deep enough to provide an unloaded
Well,
super
and it
tanker.
was funny during the whole construction. There was no port in the United States that could accommodate these tankers, except for Norfolk, because it was set up for the aircraft carriers.
Right.
But they and they were aware of this for years and years before anybody ever started to deepen their ports, and so somebody might have had the opportunity to invest money early and be the first on the block.
But it is, but you mentioned the word historically significant, and again, that's something that's part of your legacy. I mean, now that you can always, it's you, your kids, grandkids, and that you were there when that took place, and not just there, you were the project engineer.
Well, during construction, they faced many obstacles. Again, very similar to the original canal construction. The soils. They actually had to deal with seismic conditions that nobody even was concerned with in the 1900s.
So you're talking the challenges that you were having again with the soils and the seismic activity, and so how did that play into what you were responsible for and
Well, what I was exactly was the project engineer for contractor quality control. So we had labs set up on the Pacific and Atlantic coast to test all the concrete, all the soil that went into this project, and what I learned was that once you get outside the United States of America, you in a whole different universe. Yes. I tell people that I felt a lot like Dorothy the whole time I was down there. All I wanted to do is go home. The laws of Panama that cover employment, the things that we had to deal with, just talk about supply chain issues. Just getting equipment in and out of Panama was unbelievable. But it was a huge challenge, and I do often say as well, I probably didn't learn anything at all about engineering, but I learned a lot about cultures. And because we were dealing with a lot of different cultures mixed together to make this project work. So it was a huge accomplishment for Panama and the world.
Yeah, it was. I think, and I know, you speak to groups, and you're available to speak to groups about. You kind of have a presentation on that if somebody was interested in seeing that. I know you've done that before, and
absolutely. And as you know, there's nothing I love more than just running my mouth.
But it's interesting. So from a time standpoint, I want to transition. You came back. You started your business. Some days it's running you, some days you're running it, and I know when we crossed paths, it was a good timing. Jim is a participant in one of our peer advisory boards with other business owners, and we do some work together, and he's done some phenomenal things the last 3 years. But just talk a little bit about that and how that has that maybe helped you become a better business owner or the value you've gotten.
At the time you guys came into my office and sat down and started talking about this, I felt like I was drowning. I had huge financial issues. I was isolated. I was struggling to keep my head above water, and you guys couldn't have arrived at a better time. And part of the issues that I think that small business owners struggle with is absolutely no accountability. We get into the work market and we're working for a boss, and he's telling us what his expectations are, and we're trying to achieve those. And so we have some sort of guidelines. And when you're a small business owner, you've got none of that. It's just you. And so we all attempt to do research to try to find out what other people are doing, or try to find out what industry standards are. And sometimes there's not a lot out there. And so it was perfect for me, and I was highly skeptical at first, because and probably the same thing's true of all small business owners. It's like, oh, no, you don't understand. My business is so unique that you will have no idea what I do, and so this will be of limited value or use to me. And I was proved wrong very quickly. That at the end of the day, a small business is a small business, and we all have the same problems, and we all have the same issues. And so let me just describe what this board consists of, because we have 8 to 10 small business owners, and they're independent, and we don't have any large corporate people involved. And so we're all faced with these same types of issues. And at each meeting, we have some sort of a goal of possibly an issue that we're dealing with, and we can get input from these other business owners as how they may have addressed a similar issue. And this is infinitely valuable. And what I've said all along, because my concept of a board meeting or a board was based on corporate boards that I had been on and participated in before. And the problem there was, since everybody was in the same company, that their only motivation was to advance themselves, not to advance the company. And so everybody was out for themselves, not what's best for the company. And so with this type of format, where everybody's these guys don't have a dog in my fight, and so they're going to provide me what they think is an objective solution, and it has been amazing. And it has also provided me accountability, because we meet monthly, and we've set goals, and I promise you that when we get to the next meeting, they're going to say, okay, what was your solution to this problem, and how did you address it? And so I'm accountable to the whole board to make progress.
And I want to talk about that for a minute, because that's really a very difficult thing that I think most owners don't. They love the idea of, I'm my own boss, but most of the time we aren't very good bosses to ourselves. We tend to do things that we like to do, sometimes more than the things that maybe need to be done, or the most important things, or the most priority.
Well, I know for me, I would push the stuff that I had no desire to do to the back of the bus, and work on the easiest, most fun things that I had to deal with.
Yeah. And you've implemented some systems into your business. But you also were, you've always been a hard worker, obviously, and most entrepreneurs are very, very hard workers. And often just try to overwhelm everything with hours and work, and you made some changes there. And so talk about that for just a moment.
Well, I think the way we have looked at our business life it made me realize that my mental health, my personal health, my all those things were as valuable to as my work time.
That's really
I
good.
think up until
really good.
I had up until I had been involved with this organization, I think I probably took a 1-week vacation once in the first 40 years of my career. I just didn't feel like I could be away long enough. And so this helped me to realize that this was a goal for the company, for me to participate and be involved in family activities and things that I love to do, be it golf or travel or cars or whatever.
And you know, and let's take a minute, because I mean that's a big takeaway that many owners struggle with. That, and the way you said it is, it's not, you're not being selfish, you're not being neglectful of the company. Actually, you're making the company better by making sure you're healthy, your stress levels done, you're supporting, you know, your family and things. You're a better owner by doing this, as opposed to harming your business. That's fantastic. But you've got several things you enjoy, so I'm going to check off a box or two here that you've kind of spent some more. I know you're into cars. You got a really cool Bullet Mustang, but you and that genre. But so that's a hobby of yours. You've also kind of expanded your time in your music and going to see artists and guitar. So having your business in perspective and doing these things, what are some of the kind of fun things you've done the last couple of years?
Well, and I'm doing it again in 24 and 23. My son-in-law's father goes to Folly Beach for the entire month of February. And so I had, several years ago, I had spent some time out there with him, and I said, you know, this is a really good idea, and I may not be able to spend the whole month, but a week or so, and it more or less is the off season, you know, and having, you know, gone to school at the Citadel, and I lived on Folly Beach for about a year after graduation, and so it's kind of an isolated place, and it gets slow in the winter. So it's a fun place to get away, and so I've committed to do that again this year. And my daughter and grandchildren live in Charleston, so they come down there and we walk on the beach. And I think it was funny last year because Papa decided he was going to get a metal detector, and that was going to be our big thing. And so my grandson James was 7. And so he and his mother and sister went out to the beach with it, you know, and he came in from the beach and he threw it on the ground. He said, "This thing doesn't work," and I said, "Wait a second," and so I picked it up and I turned it on and I held it to my ring and it was going beep 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 beep. I said, "It works," and he said, "Well, we didn't find anything." Throw it on the ground. This thing doesn't work. But those kinds of things are great, and they're coming this weekend, and Melissa, my daughter, called me the other day and she said, "Well, James was in the back seat." She said that Papa said that we were going to play at 3 mini golf courses in one day, and she said, "Well, I better call him and remind him of that because he may not remember that he said 3 mini golf courses in one day."
But you know that. But again, making those memories, and I know you're a musician, and so you've had a chance to spend more time doing that. But I know we've talked, you know, or you've told me some stories. Again, you know, I'm not going to just work all weekend. I'm going to go ahead and go to this concert, or I'm going to go to this event and see this thing, and everything still seems to get done, doesn't it?
Yeah. My father was an inspiration to me because he was the most amazing, self-disciplined human being that I have ever met, and most people aren't really that good, you know. But when he retired, he had a schedule where on Thursdays we do this, and from 9 to 10 we're learning Chinese, and we're working in the wood shop for these 2 hours a day, and he stuck to those schedules.
That's amazing.
And so for me, that was something that I could never do. But with Tab, I'm able to make those goals and stick to them because I recognize that this is part of the health of my company, and because at the end of the day, I am the company, you know. So it's hard to break through that skin and say, no, this is important for the company.
Yes.
Everything I do is for the company.
I want your dad was in the Navy.
Yes.
Isn't that right?
Yeah.
And you lived on Annapolis for a while, and you had an interesting little playmate there. I remember you telling me about friends.
Well, you know, I think the funniest thing to me is that my philosophy is if you live long enough and travel enough places, that we all become Forrest Gump. I mean, we're involved in things that were just incidental, and that to me is what makes that a great movie. But my wife, who had heard most of my stories, apparently said she was tired of hearing my stories. But I was in 12 schools in 12 years. And sometimes that was 3 schools in 1 year.
Wow.
And sometimes it was 3 years in one school. But we traveled from Hawaii to California to up and down the East Coast. Obviously, with the Navy, it was always near a coast for the most part. But when I was in first and second grade, we lived in Annapolis, and my father was teaching at the Naval Academy and coaching baseball. And so in '59, Joe Bellino won the Heisman Trophy, and he was my hero. And so on my 7-year-old wall, I had the Sports Illustrated cover tacked to the wall, and he's sitting out in my living room.
Wow.
And so that was certainly a thrill. And my friend across the street was Bill Belichick. And
Bill Belichick.
Yeah, Billy Belichick. And his father was a coach at Navy, and had played for the Detroit Lions, and so his dad Steve was a hero of ours as well. Yeah. And so it was just you know, because then he was just a kid, but he was always a football coach, because when he was 7 and I was 6, we were playing in his backyard, and it was one of those one-on-one games where if you hit that tree with a ball, then that's a completed pass, and there was a 3-second delay in the rush and so forth. And so I tackled him one time, and I pushed him back, and I put the ball on the ground, and he picked the ball up and he moved it about 5 yards forward. And I said, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, that's my forward progress. And I said, forward progress? I tackled you here. And he said, yeah, but the rule is that as far as I advanced, he's 7.
He's 7.
As far as I advanced, that's where the ball goes. And so I went home in a huff, and I told my dad this story, and he goes, yeah, that's the rule. And so he was teaching football at that age. And again, one of the highlights was, and I forget which season this was, but the Patriots' first game was against the Bills, and Bill Belichick was coaching the Patriots, and Dickie Geron was coaching the Buffalo Bills, and he was our high school quarterback.
Wow.
In a totally different high school and across the nation,
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty neat.
But that we are so much our experiences. But when but I love the word. Sooner or later, we're become Forrest Gump with our experiences, and we run across folks that make an impact, or that we all can relate to. So, going forward, are you optimistic about your business for this coming year?
Oh, absolutely. There's some concern, I think, in the residential market. Mm-hmm. I think everybody felt like it was moving too fast, too quick, mm-hmm. and maybe due for an adjustment. We haven't really seen it yet. Mm-hmm. We've got several high-rise projects on the books, mm-hmm. and looking forward to those getting started. Obviously, the financing on those types of projects is just beyond any of my comprehension. Mm-hmm. Myrtle Beach continues to be strong, and looking forward to continuing to grow the business. Mm-hmm. And just having a blast doing it.
And I think this will be good. This year you are the president of the
the local chapter mm-hmm. of South Carolina Society of Professional Engineers.
And it's we could kind of wrap up, because this kind of talks back to the youth and company. You had your first meeting at Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, we were surprised.
Take a couple minutes.
We were surprised that Coastal had an engineering program, mm-hmm. and it was not well advertised. Mm-hmm. And so it was an opportunity to make us aware of them and them aware of us, mm-hmm. As a society of professional engineers, because you don't necessarily need to be registered to practice engineering, mm-hmm. But if you are, then you can sign and seal design drawings, mm-hmm. And that is an ultimate goal mm-hmm. of an engineer. So a lot of times they're not aware of the opportunity, but this is part of the National Society of Professional Engineers, mm-hmm. And throughout my career I've been active in professional societies, mm-hmm. Just because, that's how I was brought up. When Ken Johnson hired me in '77, he said part of being a professional is to give back to the profession, mm-hmm. and you do that mm-hmm. through professional societies, and it was more or less a requirement there, and it's just stuck with me throughout my career.
Well, and I think you're going to serve them well this year. But were you was pleased how the event went? The young people you met, how
Lee, I was amazed.
Yep.
Yeah, because having no idea that this program even existed, mm-hmm. and then to recognize that the program itself was accredited by the association that accredits engineering programs. The caliber of these young people was amazing.
Yep, that's fantastic. Well, I tell you what, Jim, I've enjoyed our conversation. I could talk for a long time, but we do have our engineer, our studio engineer, is letting me know we're winding down. But thank you. So just to kind of wrap up, just again let us know the company name and your website and how to get in touch with you.
The company is Applied Geo-Tech. Mm-hmm. And we're in the middle of downtown, 1903 Legion Street, and the website is Applied Geo-Tech SC.com.
And well, thank you for being my guest today.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I really enjoyed our time together.
Me too.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jim.
Lee.